Everyone at the airport saw a young woman carrying a sports bag. Nobody saw the years of discipline she carried inside her. Maya Richardson never expected a normal morning before a flight to become a moment that would reveal the difference between appearance and truth. At 24 years old, Maya had learned that people often noticed what was visible first, but they rarely understood the story behind it. On a busy morning at Washington Dulles International Airport, she walked through the terminal with a calm expression, a boarding pass in her hand, and a black training bag resting over her shoulder. To most travelers passing by, she looked like any other passenger preparing for a trip. But hidden behind that simple appearance was a journey built through years of dedication. Maya was not traveling for vacation. She was heading to California for a national martial arts event, an opportunity she had worked toward through countless hours of practice and personal growth. Her training was never about becoming someone people feared. It was never about proving that she was stronger than anyone else. For Maya, martial arts was a lesson in patience, awareness, and control. Her instructors had always reminded her that the greatest victory was not defeating another person. It was learning how to manage herself when life became unpredictable. As she moved through the airport, Maya noticed the familiar sounds around her. The rolling wheels of luggage across the polished floor. The announcements echoing through the terminal. The conversations of families and travelers rushing toward their gates. It was an ordinary scene, filled with ordinary people. But ordinary moments could reveal extraordinary lessons. Near one of the security areas stood Officer Daniel Brooks, an airport police officer with more than a decade of experience. Daniel believed his job was built on observation. Every day, he watched situations develop and made decisions based on what he saw. He believed experience helped him recognize problems before they became larger issues. But experience could also create assumptions when people relied too heavily on first impressions. Daniel had no idea who Maya was. He did not know about her years of training, the discipline she had developed, or the personal journey that shaped her confidence. He only saw a young woman with a sports bag moving through a crowded airport. Maya noticed the officer's attention but continued walking calmly. She had learned something important through her training. Not every challenge required an immediate reaction. Sometimes the strongest response was patience. Sometimes the most powerful choice was simply staying composed. Imagine standing in a crowded airport while people around you believe they understand your story from only a few seconds of observation. Imagine knowing you have the ability to prove them wrong, but choosing instead to remain respectful and calm. That was the kind of strength Maya carried. She was not looking for recognition. She was not searching for a confrontation. She was simply trying to reach her gate and continue her journey. But before she could board her flight, a misunderstanding began to form. A moment that seemed small at first would soon challenge the way people saw her. Because sometimes, the person everyone overlooks is the person whose story changes everything. The airport continued moving at its usual pace, but for Maya Richardson, the atmosphere around her began to feel different. She had learned throughout her life that a person could walk through a room without anyone knowing the experiences that shaped them. Behind every face was a story, and behind every decision was a reason. Maya understood this better than most because her own journey had been built on lessons that were invisible to others. As she approached the security area, she adjusted the strap of her training bag and checked her boarding information one more time. She was focused on her destination, not on the attention around her. But across the terminal, Officer Daniel Brooks noticed her. Daniel had spent many years working as an airport police officer. His daily responsibilities required him to pay attention to details, observe situations carefully, and make decisions quickly. He believed that being alert was one of the most important parts of his role. However, even experienced people could sometimes misunderstand a situation when they only had a small part of the information. Daniel looked at Maya and noticed the sports bag she carried. To him, it was simply another detail in a busy airport environment. He did not know that inside that bag were items connected to years of commitment and training. He did not know that Maya had spent countless hours learning patience, focus, and self-control. He did not know that the young woman walking calmly through the terminal had built her confidence through discipline rather than attention. When Daniel approached, Maya immediately noticed the change in the atmosphere. She understood that moments like this could become emotional if handled carelessly. But her training had taught her something important. The first reaction was not always the best reaction. The first thought was not always the complete truth. Maya answered respectfully and remained calm. She did not raise her voice. She did not try to make the situation bigger. She simply communicated and waited for understanding. Around them, some travelers began looking in their direction. A few people wondered what was happening, while others continued walking toward their gates. Maya noticed the attention, but she did not allow it to influence her behavior. She had spent years learning that confidence did not come from controlling how others saw her. Confidence came from knowing who she was even when others did not understand her. Daniel continued trying to understand the situation from his perspective. He believed he was doing his responsibility, but he did not yet realize that there was more to discover. He saw a young woman in an airport. He did not yet see the years of dedication behind her calm expression. He did not see the early mornings, the difficult training sessions, or the personal growth that created the person standing before him. The difference between what people see and what they know can be enormous. Maya understood that reality. She had experienced moments when people formed opinions before learning her story. But she also understood that truth did not need anger to become clear. It needed patience. As the conversation continued, the moment became more than a simple interaction. It became a reflection of how quickly assumptions could form and how important it was to look deeper. Neither Maya nor Daniel knew that this encounter would soon reveal a lesson about judgment, responsibility, and the quiet strength of a person who refused to lose control. The airport terminal remained busy, but the moment between Maya Richardson and Officer Daniel Brooks continued to stand apart from everything happening around them. Travelers walked past with their suitcases. Announcements echoed from the speakers above, and flights continued departing as usual. Yet within that ordinary environment, an important lesson about perception was beginning to unfold. Maya remained calm because she understood something that many people spend years learning. A person cannot always control what others think, but they can always control how they respond. Her martial arts training had taught her that discipline was not only about physical movement. It was about awareness, patience, and emotional balance. Years before this moment at the airport, Maya had learned that the hardest battles were often not against other people. They were against impatience, frustration, and the desire to react too quickly. As a teenager, she entered martial arts because she wanted to challenge herself. Over time, she discovered that the lessons extended far beyond the training floor. Her instructors taught her that confidence did not need to be loud. Real confidence came from knowing exactly who you were, even when others misunderstood you. That belief stayed with her as she stood in the airport facing uncertainty. Daniel Brooks continued observing the situation, but he started noticing something that did not fit his first impression. Maya was not behaving like someone trying to create a problem. She was not looking for attention or conflict. Instead, she remained respectful and focused on finding a solution. That difference made Daniel pause. He had seen many situations during his career, but this one reminded him that every person carried a story he could not immediately see. He knew his responsibility required careful observation, but he also began realizing that observation was only the beginning. Understanding required more. It required patience and the willingness to consider information beyond the first impression. Maya noticed the shift in the conversation, but she did not change her approach. She was not trying to prove that she was right through emotion. She believed that truth became stronger when people allowed it to appear naturally. Her greatest advantage was not a technique she learned in a training room. It was the ability to remain centered when circumstances became uncomfortable. Around them, people continued watching quietly. Some were curious. Some were uncertain. But nobody knew the complete story behind the young woman carrying the sports bag. Nobody knew about the years of commitment that shaped her character. Nobody knew that the same discipline that helped her in martial arts also guided her through everyday life. As the minutes passed, the situation began revealing something deeper. The question was no longer only about what happened in that airport terminal. The bigger question was about how people choose to see each other. Daniel believed he was looking at a situation that needed to be handled. Maya understood she was standing inside a moment that required patience. Neither of them knew that the encounter would eventually become a lesson about judgment, responsibility, and the difference between having power and having control. Because sometimes the strongest person is not the one who changes the situation around them. Sometimes the strongest person is the one who refuses to let the situation change who they are. The atmosphere inside the airport continued to change as more time passed, but Maya Richardson remained the same person she had been from the beginning. She stood with patience, clarity, and a quiet confidence that came from years of personal discipline. She understood that difficult moments often revealed the lessons people carried within them. For Maya, this was not about proving she was stronger than anyone else. It was about showing that strength had a deeper meaning. Her martial arts journey had started years earlier, long before anyone at the airport knew her name. When she first entered a training facility as a teenager, she expected to learn techniques and improve her physical abilities. Instead, she discovered something much more valuable. She discovered the importance of patience, respect, and self-control. Her instructors often reminded her that a person's greatest challenge was not always the situation around them. Sometimes, the greatest challenge was managing their own emotions when the world became uncertain. Those lessons stayed with Maya throughout her life. They helped her during competitions, during personal challenges, and now, during a moment when she felt misunderstood. She knew that reacting quickly would not reveal the truth. She knew that frustration would not create understanding. So she chose the one thing she could always control, herself. Daniel Brooks continued watching the situation unfold. The more he observed Maya, the more he noticed the difference between confidence and confrontation. Maya was confident, but she was not trying to challenge him. She was composed, but she was not ignoring the seriousness of the situation. She was simply choosing a thoughtful response. That choice made Daniel reconsider his first impression. He began to realize that a person's appearance, belongings, or circumstances could never tell the entire story. Everyone carried experiences that remained invisible to strangers. Maya's sports bag was not just a bag. It represented years of commitment. Her calm expression was not indifference. It represented years of learning how to stay balanced under pressure. The people around them still did not know the full story. They did not know that Maya had trained not only her body but also her mind. They did not know that every practice session had taught her something about patience and responsibility. They only saw a single moment, but Maya knew that a single moment could never define a person completely. As Daniel continued his interaction with her, a quiet realization began forming. The situation was not as simple as it first appeared. There were details he had not considered and questions that needed deeper understanding. At that moment, Maya's martial arts training was not about movement or competition. It was about awareness. It was about knowing when to speak, when to listen, and when patience could create a better outcome than emotion. Imagine having the ability to react instantly, but choosing calm instead. Imagine carrying years of preparation, but never needing to announce it. That was Maya's true strength. She did not need to convince everyone around her who she was. Her actions were already telling the story. And soon, as more information came to light, the people watching would discover that the quiet traveler they had underestimated carried a lesson far greater than anyone expected. The airport continued to move around Maya Richardson as the moment slowly became more meaningful than anyone expected. Travelers passed by with their carry-on bags, announcements echoed through the terminal, and the rhythm of daily life continued without interruption. Yet within that ordinary morning, a powerful lesson about perception and understanding was taking shape. Maya remained calm because she knew something many people forget during difficult moments. The first version of a story is rarely the complete story. Her martial arts training had taught her to look beyond the surface. It taught her that every situation had details that were not immediately visible and that every person carried experiences others might never know. Daniel Brooks continued observing Maya, and his perspective began to shift. At the beginning, he focused on the details directly in front of him. He noticed the airport environment, the sports bag, and the circumstances that brought his attention toward her. But as the conversation continued, he started recognizing that those details represented only a small piece of a much larger picture. Maya was not simply a traveler passing through the airport. She was someone who had spent years building discipline and confidence through dedication. She had learned that strength was not something a person displayed when they wanted approval. Strength was something a person carried quietly through every decision they made. Maya remembered the early days of her training. She remembered walking into a martial arts studio with curiosity and determination, never realizing that the lessons would influence every part of her life. The techniques were important, but the mindset behind them mattered even more. Her instructors taught her that control was not about limiting herself. It was about understanding herself. It was about knowing that emotions could be powerful, but wisdom decided how those emotions were used. That lesson guided her in the airport. She did not need to prove her abilities. She did not need to explain every achievement she had earned. Her character was already visible through the way she handled the moment. Daniel began noticing that Maya's patience was not accidental. It came from preparation, came from experience. It came from years of learning how to remain steady when circumstances became uncertain. He realized that someone could appear ordinary while carrying extraordinary qualities. Around them, some travelers continued watching, still unaware of the deeper story unfolding. They saw a conversation between an officer and a passenger, but they did not see the journey behind it. They did not know about the commitment, the challenges, and the personal growth that shaped Maya into the person standing before them. Detective Lauren Mitchell would later become involved in reviewing the details, but at that moment, the most important change was already beginning. It was not a change in the airport. It was a change in perspective. Daniel was beginning to understand that responsibility was not only about making decisions. It was about making sure those decisions came from understanding rather than assumption. Maya had not changed who she was because of the situation around her. She had simply revealed the values she carried every day. And as the truth continued to unfold, everyone involved would discover that the greatest strength she brought into that airport was not a skill she learned through training. It was the wisdom to choose dignity when the world expected a reaction. The truth behind Maya Richardson's presence in the airport was slowly becoming clearer, but the most important discovery was not about what she could do. It was about why she chose to remain calm when the situation became difficult. For Maya, discipline had never been about creating a moment where others would notice her. It had always been about preparing herself for moments when nobody understood her. That morning, surrounded by strangers and uncertainty, she was simply living by the same principles that guided her every day. Detective Lauren Mitchell became involved as the details of the encounter required a closer review. Lauren had spent years understanding that every situation had multiple perspectives. She knew that a complete picture could not be created from a single observation or a brief conversation. Her approach was simple. Listen carefully, examine the facts, and understand the full context before reaching a conclusion. As Lauren began looking deeper into the situation, she discovered details about Maya that changed the way the moment appeared. Maya was not just a traveler with a sports bag. She was someone who had dedicated years to martial arts training, personal growth, and self-improvement. Her journey was built on consistency and commitment. She had learned lessons that extended far beyond a training facility. She had learned how to remain focused when emotions were high, how to communicate with respect, and how to understand that patience could be a form of strength. Daniel Brooks also continued reflecting on the encounter. He thought about the first moments when he noticed Maya and how quickly his mind began creating an explanation. He realized that people often do this without even noticing. They see a small piece of information and create a larger story around it. But people are not single moments. They are collections of experiences, choices, and challenges that others may never see. The more Daniel learned about Maya, the more he understood that her calm behavior was not something that happened by accident. It was the result of years of preparation. It was the result of choosing discipline every day. Maya eventually explained that martial arts had changed the way she viewed challenges. She said the most valuable lessons were not the techniques themselves. The greatest lessons were patience, respect, and responsibility. Training taught her that having ability meant nothing without wisdom. A person's true character was revealed by the choices they made when they had the opportunity to react emotionally. Those words showed everyone involved that the story was about much more than one airport encounter. It was about how people see each other and how easily assumptions can hide the truth. The people who witnessed the moment at the airport had only seen a few minutes of Maya's life. They had not seen the years of effort behind her confidence. They had not seen the sacrifices that built her discipline. They had not seen the journey that created the person standing quietly in front of them. As the review continued, a deeper lesson began to emerge. Responsibility was not only about having authority. It was about using that authority with understanding. Maya never needed to announce her strength because her actions already showed it. Daniel never expected the encounter to become a lesson about perception and accountability. But sometimes the moments that challenge us the most are the moments that teach us the most. And for everyone involved, the truth was becoming clear. Real strength is not measured by how much power a person can display. It is measured by how much control they have over themselves when that power is never needed. The airport encounter that began with uncertainty was now revealing a deeper lesson about perception, responsibility, and the choices people make when faced with incomplete information. Maya Richardson continued moving forward with the same calm mindset she had carried from the beginning. She did not see the situation as a chance to prove someone wrong. She saw it as another reminder of the values she had spent years developing. Her martial arts training had taught her that every challenge presented a choice. A person could allow emotions to take control, or they could choose awareness and patience. Maya always believed the second choice created the strongest outcome. Detective Lauren Mitchell continued reviewing the details and speaking with everyone connected to the situation. Her goal was not to create blame before understanding the full picture. She knew that fairness required careful attention. Every person involved had a perspective, but the truth existed beyond individual opinions. As Lauren learned more about Maya's background, she began to understand why the young woman handled the moment differently from what many people might have expected. Maya's training was not simply about learning techniques. It was about building a mindset. Years of practice had taught her how to stay focused when circumstances became uncomfortable. It taught her that confidence did not need to be announced. It could be shown through patience, respect, and thoughtful decisions. Daniel Brooks also found himself reflecting on his own approach. He thought about the difference between seeing and understanding. Seeing was noticing what appeared in front of him. Understanding required asking questions and considering what might exist beyond the obvious. He realized that every person he encountered had a story that was impossible to know from a few seconds of observation. Maya's story was a powerful example of that truth. The young woman walking through the airport was carrying much more than a training bag. She was carrying years of commitment, lessons, and personal growth. Her strength came from the choices she made long before anyone was watching. She did not become calm because of the airport situation. She was calm because she had practiced becoming that person every day. Around the terminal, people continued with their journeys, unaware of the transformation happening through a simple moment of reflection. Some moments disappear quickly, but others leave behind lessons that continue long after they end. This was one of those moments. Daniel began to understand that responsibility was not only about following rules or making decisions quickly. It was also about recognizing the humanity of the people affected by those decisions. Lauren recognized that careful examination could reveal truths that were invisible at first glance. Maya showed that dignity could remain strong even during difficult circumstances. The most important discovery was not that Maya had martial arts experience. The most important discovery was understanding. Why that experience mattered. Her training gave her more than physical ability. It gave her patience, discipline, and the wisdom to choose the right response. The encounter changed how people viewed the situation, but Maya herself remained unchanged. She was still the same person who walked into the airport that morning, focused, respectful, and determined to continue her journey. Because true strength does not appear only when someone faces a challenge. True strength is built quietly through every decision made before that challenge ever arrives. The story of Maya Richardson had moved far beyond the airport terminal where everything began. What started as a brief moment of uncertainty had become a powerful reminder that people are often much more than what others see at first glance. Maya never expected attention, recognition, or a public conversation about her character. She was simply living by the same principles that had guided her for years. Stay focused, stay respectful, stay in control. Those lessons had become part of who she was long before anyone knew her name. As Detective Lauren Mitchell completed her review, she continued to see the same pattern throughout the situation. The most important details were not always the ones that appeared immediately. They were the details discovered through patience and understanding. Maya's background revealed a person who had spent years developing more than physical ability. She had developed emotional discipline, responsibility, and a strong sense of awareness. Her martial arts training gave her confidence, but the deeper lessons gave her wisdom. She learned that a person's greatest challenge was often not the outside world. It was the ability to remain true to their values when the outside world created pressure. Daniel Brooks thought carefully about what the experience had taught him. He realized that every decision made in a position of authority carried a responsibility to understand the people involved. He had always believed that observation was important, but now he understood that observation without understanding could create an incomplete picture. Maya had reminded him that every person carried a story beyond what could be seen in a single moment. She was not defined by the airport encounter. She was not defined by what anyone assumed about her. She was defined by the choices she made when those assumptions appeared. Maya eventually returned her attention to the reason she had been traveling in the first place. Her martial arts event was still ahead of her, and she continued preparing with the same dedication she always had. She did not allow the experience to change her purpose. If anything, it reinforced the values she had practiced for years. Around the airport, the people who witnessed the situation may have remembered different details. Some may have remembered the confusion. Others may have remembered the conversation. But the most important lesson was something deeper. They witnessed a person choosing dignity during an uncertain moment. They witnessed how discipline could guide someone through pressure. They witnessed that strength did not always need to be loud. It could exist quietly through patience and self-control. Maya's journey showed that the most powerful response was not always the most dramatic one. Sometimes the greatest impact came from a person who refused to become defined by the actions or opinions of others. Daniel learned that authority became stronger when it was combined with empathy. Lauren learned that truth became clearer when people took the time to examine the full story. Maya continued forward knowing that her greatest achievement was not proving anything to anyone. It was remaining the person she had worked so hard to become. Because real strength is not about showing the world what you can do. Real strength is about showing the world who you are, especially when the moment becomes difficult. Days after the moment that changed how people viewed the situation, Maya Richardson continued with the same quiet determination she had carried throughout her entire journey. She did not wake up the next morning seeking attention or recognition. She did not want to become known because of a misunderstanding. What mattered to Maya was something much deeper. She wanted people to remember the lesson behind the moment. Person should never be reduced to a single assumption, a single glance, or a single story told without knowing the truth. Her journey had always been about growth, and that journey continued. As Maya arrived in California for her martial arts event, she stepped into the training space with the same mindset that had guided her through every challenge. The room was filled with athletes who understood dedication, patience, and commitment. They knew that success was not created in one dramatic moment. It was created through thousands of quiet choices made when nobody was watching. Maya understood that better than anyone. Her greatest achievement was not the ability to perform difficult techniques. Her greatest achievement was becoming someone who could remain calm when life tested her character. Meanwhile, Daniel Brooks continued reflecting on the airport encounter. The experience stayed with him because it changed the way he viewed his role. He realized that responsibility was not only about responding to situations. It was also about understanding the people inside those situations. Every person he met had a background, a reason, and a story that existed beyond what appeared in front of him. That lesson stayed with him as he continued his work. Detective Lauren Mitchell also carried the experience forward. She saw how important it was to look beyond the surface and allow facts, patience, and fairness to guide decisions. The situation became a reminder that truth was not always found in the first few seconds of an encounter. Sometimes truth required time, attention, and the willingness to listen. Maya never considered herself a symbol. She considered herself a person who was simply trying to live according to her values. But that was exactly why her story connected with so many people. She showed that dignity did not depend on how others treated you. It depended on how you chose to respond. She showed that confidence did not require proving superiority. It came from knowing yourself. And she showed that discipline was not about controlling others. It was about controlling yourself. The airport moment eventually became a memory, but the lesson remained. It reminded people that assumptions could create distance, while understanding could create connection. It reminded those with authority that power carried responsibility. It reminded those facing unfair judgment that their identity was never defined by someone else's opinion. Maya continued her path, carrying the same values she had always carried. She carried her training, her patience, and her belief that the strongest response was often the one guided by wisdom. Because in the end, the greatest lesson was not about who had more power in a difficult moment. It was about who had the strength to choose humanity. He believed strength came from control over a situation. She showed that true strength came from control over oneself.